Don't Have Time TV is here at ChangeNOW in Paris. It's a really big event. A lot of people here. We're told 40,000 people, all talking about climate change and all talking about climate solutions. And that's what we're going to talk about now with our two wonderful guests.
Yeah, so I'm Johan Falk, so I'm the co-founder and CEO of the Exponential Roadmap Initiative.
My name is Reid, and I'm Sustainability Director at Oatly, the oat milk company.
Oatly, right. So that's the one where we're all drinking Oatly because we've all left milk and we now do it in our coffee and in our cereals and everything like that.
Exactly.
Okay, super. All right, we're going to ask a few questions to each of you, and I'm going to start off with you first, Johan. So the Exponential Roadmap Initiative, known very well, working with a lot of businesses on trying to meet climate targets, quite high ambition climate targets, but you're launching something new called the Exponential Solutions Movement. What is that, and why do we need it?
Exactly, yeah, Nick, science is very clear. We would need to halve emissions by 2030 and every decade. We knew already 2018 that we had the solutions to take us to the first halving, and today we have the solutions to take us even to the second and the third halving. But we haven't bent the curve yet, but we might be very close to bending the curve, actually. And one of the reasons for that is that we need to scale up the solutions in order to shift out the fossil economy much faster. So they're not scaling sufficiently fast. We are scaling renewable energy exponentially. We are scaling electrical vehicle exponentially. We have a number of solutions which are really early in this exponential S-curve, but they need to move faster. So far, most of our focus has been on these down curves, how we're cutting emissions. Now we need a laser focus also on the up curves, how we can scale up the solutions. So that is the reason why we need this strong movement among companies and in society.
Okay. Caroline, from your point of view, from Oatly's point of view, why do you think that such a movement is actually required?
Yeah, so obviously Oatly, part of the food system, as all we are, as we eat food. It's good to understand that the food system is completely broken today. So it contributes to 1/3 of all global greenhouse gas emissions, uses huge amounts of resources, doesn't meet our nutritional needs of people on our planet. So the system needs to change, it needs to be transformed, and to transform the food system to one that is within the planetary boundaries and meets nutritional needs, we need climate solutions, plant-based alternatives to heavily carbon impactful meat and dairy, and we need them to scale rapidly to have a sustainable food system for the future.
So I mean, you have solutions, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And you're using solutions, you're deploying solutions. Do you think that there are more solutions in your secret drawers back at Oatly that will be coming through at some moment?
We have a big job to do. So if we look at plant-based milks, I mean, Oatly is a disruptor of the milk category. We want to come in with much more, with climate solutions to cow's milk. And generally, if we look at the markets where we operate, plant-based milk is about 10% of all milk. So we've got a huge journey to do to continue to scale. And so our whole ambition at Oatly is to grow and to replace cow's milk with Oatly to get to that tipping point. So we've got a huge way to go just to replace cow's milk with oat milk.
Okay. I've got another question for you here, Caroline. You have qualified Oatly and Oatly's products under this climate solutions framework, this climate solutions movement framework. Has that been a useful process internally, externally, or both?
It's been definitely both. So let's start with internally. I mentioned, we are a climate solutions product now, we know that. But before that, we had done a lot of LCA comparisons to know what is the impact of Oatly versus cow's milk. And so we knew that we had a product that could really help reduce the impact of the milk category. But by having a framework that defines climate solutions and we could qualify, really brings another level of credibility and that we can feel proud of internally, but that we can also use externally to communicate another level of the impact our products can have. Another thing from an internal perspective, which we really loved about the Climate Solutions Framework, is it acknowledges that companies that are producing climate solutions products need to grow, right? We need to have this rapid, the up curve, to replace the status quo as is. To grow, it's very hard to then set absolute climate reduction targets, because that would actually limit our growth and limit the positive impact we can have. And so what we also love about the Climate Solutions Framework is it identifies that what makes most sense for climate solutions companies and products is to have this intensity climate reduction targets. So we definitely still commit to reduce our own footprint, but it's our own footprint per litre, so that we can really scale up and replace cow's milk.
Well, that's interesting, because I mean, I was thinking myself all the same time, you know, we have the science-based targets, that's about reducing your climate emissions, but then you're talking about something here that involves, in a sense, the ability to grow, and through the process of growing, actually then lead to lower emissions.
Exactly, exactly. So for us, we look at not only reducing our own footprint per litre, but contributing to sort of societal net zero, contributing to the actual reduction of the milk category as a totality.
Right, okay. So there's a direct and an indirect reduction in a sense. Okay. Johan, could you describe what is the role of different types of companies in this solutions movement that you're talking about?
Let me first just comment a little bit on why we developed this framework. As Caroline mentioned, we started like 2-3 years ago. It's very complementary to the Science-Based Target Initiative, which we work closely with and Race to Zero, and we're part of all other standardizations, which was primarily developed for large companies with high emissions, which need to reduce their emissions. So we fully support that from our perspective. But we also need this complementary framework, we realized, the Climate Solutions Framework, so that we can actually recognize and celebrate companies and solutions which can be qualified as solutions which can shift out the traditional fossil economy. And as Caroline said, they need to grow exponentially, so they need to apply intensity targets, not absolute reduction targets. But it's also important to be able to do that with integrity, and that's the reason why we developed the framework together with Oxford and Race to Zero, and run it through a long consultation. So that's also important from the company's perspective, that qualification.
So, Johan, could you describe the role of different types of companies in this solutions movement that you're creating?
Yes, let me tell you a bit why we actually developed this climate solutions framework, which Caroline mentioned. So we actually started 2-3 years ago when we've been collaborating with Oxford and other scientific institutions. The reason, as I mentioned initially, is that all focus has been so far on the big companies needing to cut emissions, but we also need a framework to recognize and celebrate companies and solutions which we need to implement in order to shift out the fossil economy, and they need to grow exponentially. But it's also important to do that with some integrity, and that is the reason why we need a framework, so solutions and companies can be qualified. And to be able to be qualified as a climate solution, it needs to be substantially, not incrementally better than the market average. We're talking about more than 50%. One example could be steel. We're working with a company as well called Stegra, doing fossil-free steel, which is qualifying under this framework. So they're providing steel which has less than 85% carbon footprint compared to market average. And of course that has to scale as quickly as ever possible to shift out the other solutions. That's the reason why we shall apply intensity targets for these products. It's very complementary to the Science-Based Target Initiative, because think about it, the big companies, in order to transform their value chains, they also need to work with these solution providers, the disruptive solution providers, to bring in these solutions to be able to cut their Scope 3 emissions. So it's all connected.
So let's look ahead a little bit. I mean, what's next? What is needed for these solutions to scale, which is absolutely clear. Otherwise, they're just picture postcards and not in the real world. And how each of you working to engage with more companies and other actors in this area?
Yeah, well, I think to the first question, what does it take to scale? I mean, from Oatly's perspective, we need to remove barriers. So, I mean, of course, we need a fair playing field when it comes to policy. Why should people be paying double as much VAT for plant-based milks as cow milks, for example?
Yeah.
We need to make sure that plant-based foods and oat milks are available where cow's milk is. EU school milk scheme is a great example. But we also what we're doing with climate solutions often is we're completely disrupting an industry. We're challenging the status quo and coming with a solution to replace it. And what we are seeing is a fight back. So misinformation and disinformation is also something that needs to be addressed. Oatly is a company grounded in science, and so we are fighting back with facts and science. But it is a barrier that needs to be removed, I see, in many industries to really actually scale solutions. But I think what we also recognize is that we all, as human beings, have a lot of choices to make. And we have the solutions out there, and people, I think, should feel hope and agency that we are on the upcurve, we are going to be able to tackle the crisis we're in, and that is through adopting different climate solutions. So my final words would be, as I think Johan Falk says, one of the most important things you can do as an individual is choose plant-based foods and a more plant-centric diet. So that's how I hope we'll see the scale of plant-based foods and oat
Okay,
milk.
interesting. Johan?
Yeah, to add to that, I would say first we need to, of course, engage many more solution companies in these movements in all sectors. We're talking about food, of course. We're talking about regen agriculture. We're talking about close to nature forestry. We're talking about distributed renewable energy, which is scaling really well, but also electrified transportation, mobility as a service. All solutions in the value chain basically exist, and we need to do our utmost to ensure that they can scale faster. And we need companies which has that capability to really scale fast. That also means that the large companies working in the front line, the keystone actors transforming their value chain, they need to connect much closer with these companies, because it will actually support them to achieve their science-based targets, to bring in these solutions in their value chain. But the big companies also need to set targets how they transform their own product portfolio, setting up targets for scaling up solutions within their own portfolio. Quite few of the big ones that have done that so far. But then comment on finance, of course. How can we work to support impact investors, which also need this way to qualify solutions in order to shift finance and scale up solution companies. But wrapping up on policy, well, the story, let's take Europe as an example. Europe has a tremendous opportunity to actually take a lead in some of these solutions if we can get the right a few policies in place, which would mean more jobs, better economy, better wealth as well, and taking a much stronger position in the global economy. So I think that narrative around the solutions and the next generation value chains is incredibly important. And as Caroline said, well, we should have the backing from people. 89% of the people like to have stronger action in terms of climate. But I think the key is to connect it actually to the modern economy, the new solutions, and better wealth for people. It's not a burden.
To get this clear, this isn't about replacing science-based targets.
No.
This is about bringing another element to play. And in a sense, I imagine they're quite mutually reinforcing, because in a sense, if you have to meet a climate target, you've got to find solutions to be able to meet that climate target as well. So it's not two different worlds. It's two worlds actually operating and mutually reinforcing each other, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot of our big customers, big supermarkets out there, they ask for their supplier, their SBTI, and they ask for their suppliers to be SBTI. But actually what the supermarkets really need to recognize is, as they transform their portfolios and, for example, introduce more plant-based offerings, they're going to meet their targets as the climate solutions then grow. So it's definitely go hand in hand.
Yeah, super.